Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we have decided to talk about. And you have an idea what the show is about by the title, Time for a Re-Deal. And that means a lot because my good friend to my right here, Will Poole, thought of that title, and he's got a lot to say about it. Next to him is Ted Pyle, another friend of mine. He's as goofy as I am, Ted is. And these are fellow humanists, and they are also part of the Sunday morning regular early bird discussion group at the Humanists of Greater Portland gathering in Northwest Portland on 26th and Xavier. I think that's where it is now. We'll talk more about that later on. It's a good discussion group, and my friend David Peterson is on the sidelines watching us over here to be sure we don't screw things up, because eventually he's going to be in my slot here talking to you about conversations and other interesting stuff. So how are you feeling right now, Will?
Well, I'm actually very tired because I don't always sleep too well at night, and I'm not used to being on television, and so I just feel a wee bit nervous about my performance here. I don't think I'll make a Fox special on television.
You will. How are you, Ted?
I'm fine.
You're good, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm a wee bit nervous too, as I always am. Mm-hmm. And no matter what's going on, I always start off nervous, and after about 2 or 3 minutes, something goofy happens, and I relax, and I'm off and running again. I'm excited about the kind of stuff we'll get into because I'm kind of older too, like my friend Will here. Will is as old as baseball. But some of the stuff he talks about, most of you guys are too young to know what he's talking about, and I do. And I can hark back to those days too, so it's really enjoyable. And as I said a moment ago, there's always something new I learned about a certain time in my life when I was a kid, that he saw the same thing, but he saw it from a different perspective. So for that reason, you're always welcome to come on and talk about stuff. And Ted, you are so radical. I never know where you're coming from or where you're going to go. So, I think we're all three humanists, and I think we're all of a similar political persuasion. And we'll talk in the first part of the show a little more about personal stuff, about who you are, before we go into what's meant by that title, Time for a Re-Deal. I'll say a few words about myself. Unless you're new out there, you know I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, and I was a Catholic kid, Roman Catholic, altar boy for years, and discovered that religion wasn't working for me, so I became a-religious and became an agnostic, a humanist, and I discovered that I was been a humanist all my life, even though I labeled myself a Catholic and altar boy. And for some reason or other, I had a liberal leftist political persuasion. Then I discovered, as years went by, that I was a democratic socialist. Yeah, that's a great idea. And my philosophy is KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, kind, friendly, and charitable. And I discovered the other day, talking to somebody about my philosophy, we were passing time, and whatever else you need to do is just be nice. As simple as that. Be nice. He says, how'd you get to live as long as you have and so successfully as you have, apparently? And I says, 2 or 3 other things, and then simply being nice. And he looked at me, and he understood what I said. So he's a friend of mine for life, too. Have 5 daughters, and I'm on my 2nd marriage with my lovely wife, Pat, who's at home now, keeping the home fires burning. I just had a total knee replacement here 3 weeks ago, and I'm walking around as though I didn't have my knee replaced at all. And my friend Will said a few minutes ago, "You've lost weight, haven't you?" I says, "Yes. I lost 10 pounds in 3 weeks, but it'll come back on again." That's all I want to say about myself right now. Who will volunteer to say a little more about who they are right now personally? You, Ted, you're looking at me like you got something to say.
Well, I don't think I've had anything particularly different in the last few months.
But there are a bunch of folks who haven't seen you before.
Okay. Well,
Where were you born?
I was born in Erlangen, Germany in 1946.
Ah,
And I was born Detlev, and I was smuggled into the United States illegally. So I found out I was an illegal alien, and I just spent 2 or 3 years getting my citizenship straightened out after living here.
I told you he's weird, didn't I?
And then I think back, well, they arrested me for refusing to go to the war, but I wasn't even a citizen, but they didn't know it, and neither did I.
Really?
Yeah,
How
they tried to draft me, and see, nobody did any checking. There was no Homeland Security back then, so people didn't check anything. So I was 16 years old. I walked into the Social Security office. They gave me a Social Security card. They never said, "Well, it says you're born in Erlangen, Germany." So when I went to go get my Social Security, they said, "Erlangen, Germany, where's your citizenship?" And I said, "What citizenship? I've been here for 60 years." So I had to go through a process. My old high school physics teacher was like 96 years old, had to come in and other people to testify that I was really a person and that I had actually lived here.
And this is all recent that this happened.
Yeah, because they denied me my Social Security. I couldn't get it. After paying it, oh yeah, we got a record of you here, married, blah, 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 and paying in for 60 years, but that doesn't mean anything. I was an illegal alien. So finally I got through the hoop and got my check, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you didn't end up as a Nazi. You were born in Germany.
Yeah.
You're half German then.
Right, yeah.
How come you didn't embrace the Nazi Party?
Well, I'm the product of a set of contradictory principles. My mother was a Nazi who celebrated Hitler's birthday, and she was infinitely distrustful of Jews, but she wasn't prejudiced against blacks because the Germans had no blacks to be prejudiced against, so they didn't have it. So I was raised in this complete contradiction, as you know. And yeah, I understand how I got to be the way I am, but it's unusual next to everyone else. So I was able to go through life and realize that prejudice was a sociological phenomenon. It didn't exist in reality. So I didn't take prejudice personally, even though I experienced it, and wound up being both in the groups of white supremacists and Black Panthers. And was able to tell both of them, hey, the other side isn't as bad as you think they are.
You have had. So you, how do you see yourself politically? Is it something other than leftist? Are you for a Tea Party or what?
Well, yeah, I'm to the left because I'm progressive. I didn't inherit wealth, so conserving it is not my objective. So I think that's the basis of conservatism is you already have it and you're afraid of change.
What's your philosophy about life?
My philosophy is that it's a mixture of all my exposures. My father was a military drill sergeant, and I was raised on a military base where the main mentality was life was about killing other people successfully. And so slowly, by going to college and having other experiences, I started figuring out I was being lied to. And then I became an anti-war person rather than a pro-war.
Well,
I'll try to cut this just as short as I possibly
that'll
can.
be the day knowing you.
Okay, I was born on the stormy straits of San Juan de Fuca, way up north, the opposite end of the continent from you. And I consider this an honor to share this brotherhood. Both of you are my brothers, you know, because we have a great commonality, and it would take us forever to try to decipher and give this out to the rest of the public. Okay.
The Straits of Juan de Fuca, where is that again?
Oh, Port Angeles, right across from Vancouver Island, and in fact, we used to go to Victoria on the ferry and the rest of this type of thing. And I'm a product of the boom times of the 1920s, you know, those were the good times.
When were you born?
Well, I'm not going to give you the actual date, but I was born in 1926, which is just over the middle of it, but that was still supposedly part of the big time. By the way, my dad while he was up there. He was a school administrator for 29 years. But I've got to come back. He was somebody extremely special and a real American story. Poor farm boy from eastern Tennessee, came out west at age 14, went to work at a box factory in Hoquiam, Washington, from dawn to 10 hours a day for 75 cents at age 14. And somebody asked him, well, one time, well, 75 cents wasn't all that much money. And he said, well, he could spend 10 hours plowing the field back in Tennessee for his uncle. He only got a quarter. So, again, we get into this generation thing. So how did he become a school administrator for 29 years? He worked extremely hard. At the age of 19, he passed the state teacher's exam in the state of Washington and went from there on. At age 26, he went back to visit Hoquiam. And there was my mother, and both of them were 26 years old. They had a conversation, decided they could get married. This was in June of 1916. Decided they could get married in about 3 years, so they were married in August of the same year, 2 months later. So anyway, this is a Horatio Alger story, but my parents were unusual. My mother bragged continuously about being able to vote in the election of 1912, and she voted for Theodore Roosevelt on the Bull Moose ticket. She was very much a part of the feminist movement in the early 20th century, and I should say the family background were strictly Republicans. On my mother's side, there were Scots and Irish, maritime craftsmen. This was a maritime family. My father's side, free soil type of people. And my grandfather was a veteran of the Civil War in the Ohio volunteer artillery. He served for 3 years. Okay, so that's an awful lot of family background. And they came together, all right. So anyway, I'm a product of the big woods up north in so many ways, You wanted to know about Time for a Re-Deal? Because I would like to mention 1928.
Of course.
1928, my dad got a job as superintendent of Redmond Public Schools. Redmond, Washington, not Oregon. And it looked great. So they acquired some property and drew all their money out of the bank just about and built us a beautiful home overlooking the town of 460 people. That was all the bigger it was long before Microsoft. We built this beautiful home, and we moved in August of 1929, and at the end of October of 29, 31st, the bank was bankrupt. The savings and everything, because of the crash of 29, the savings were all, but we had this lovely home paid for, and the property fortunately acquired had a rental even down below. So it was just a marvelous thing. I could mention so many stories about growing up, the kids that I knew, and I realized later on were suffering from malnutrition and all sorts of other things that would come. Let me mention the Bush boys, twins, went to school every other day because they only had one pair of shoes between them. A guy named Neil who fell down and broke his collarbone. It wasn't much of a fall, and I realized many, many years later that he had improperly developed bone structure, ricket stoutment.
This is depression.
Depression memories. I have all kinds of them. My favorite memory, and I could go on endlessly about this. I'm going to cut it down to one last one. The northeast corner of Lake Washington, there was a huge big sawmill there. It was down. All the mills were down. They'd had company housing along it. Most of it was abandoned, but there were a few people living there. And I used to do an awful lot of fishing. I ran away the first time when I was 18 months old, by the way. We won't go into that.
18 months old, you ran away.
So anyway, I remember walking by, and there at the doorstep was this little girl in her dress, didn't wear slacks, with a runny nose, dirty, and so on, looking forlorn. And these were the type of early memories I had. Now, my father's pay, he wasn't paid in money because the state went broke. So you issue warrants, interest-bearing warrants. Only no one knows when the state is going to become solvent again. Does that sound familiar today? You see, we're
What
coming
goes
right
around comes around.
Okay. So anyway, at the peak, I think of the Depression, those things were discounted about 30%. So in actual fact, when people talk about being poor off, bad off during the Depression, we didn't have much of anything. I didn't know I was any different than the rest because no one had anything much. All I ever heard was, we've got to economize. All right, we're going to come from 1932, 33 to the present time. What kept us going in this little town on the crossroads? Gardens, all kinds of gardens. Everyone had gardens, fruit trees and so on. And a small town, everyone knows everyone else's business, which is too bad in some respects, but good in others. And so we knew who needed what. And there was a huge degree of cooperation that went on at this particular period. So this is basically my background. And when we're ready for it, I would like to discuss 1933, when Roosevelt took over.
So you, did you ever have a religion?
Oh yes, that type of thing. Well, I could go in a long history. I had my paternal grandmother's eldest brother was a missionary in China from 1873 to 1800, 7 years. Through the Methodist Board of Missions set out, a couple of my cousins and myself gathered his writings, which are now the originals at Wesleyan University in Ohio. Okay, so going from Catholicism to Presbyterian to Methodism, and Methodism took over so much of it. It was like a disease, and my folks were very much part of the social concerns branch of the Methodist Church. So they were broke with Republicanism, Roosevelt progressivism, Theodore Roosevelt, Wilsonian democracy to the New Deal. Roosevelt and Eleanor in particular was my mother's great. She never missed a column of my day, I don't think at all. So we have nothing to fear but fear itself, and the New Deal was such a radical change in all of our lives.
Okay.
It's about time for Ted to say something.
Say something, Ted.
Well, I didn't live during that time, but I remember getting a great deal of pleasure of telling everyone from that generation, after I figured out that the whole Depression was completely unnecessary, and that if they would have known more, they would have gotten up and started the mills and the factories and produced products in order to make a living, rather than sitting around waiting for the investment community to feel like the time is right to invest money in creating jobs and in creating profit. The country was awash with materialism, raw materials. It had industrial capacity, and it sat there stupidly looking at one another saying, well, there's no jobs, who can you blame?
This is because the investor class didn't learn how to use their wealth and their money to manage and manipulate and control as completely as they do nowadays.
Well, I phrase it that until we figure out that economics is a man-made system, and that barring weather and the intervention of nature, there is no reason whatsoever for people not to work, not to produce, and not to have a good standard of living. But if you allow the investment community to make all the decisions, and they decide it's not a good day today, then you're going to have a bad day. And the country sat there and did that for, 10 years? Until finally, slowly, this Keynesian idea came along. Maybe the government, or maybe somebody to step up to the plate and get the ball rolling, put people to work. Hitler did it. He said, go to work, worry about the money later, it'll come. But if you do nothing, nothing will come. And it's just, when I figured it out, it blew my mind that a whole generation of Americans allowed a country with oil coming out of the ground and timber that so far they never ever use it all up, sat there idly believing that the system would fix itself somehow. And we're at the crux of the same kind of a problem today with a couple of different variations. We've used all the raw materials and done the easiest thing, but now we're back to the same thing of, oh my God, that's a crisis and the economy's bad and the stock market's bad. And it's the same thing, except for automation, technology, and globalization has moved in and changed the paradigms, but the end story is still the same. There's no reason in the world for the world to have a crisis.
Really?
We're filthy rich. We have all kinds of technology and all kinds of abundance, but because we stick to an old set of rules about who owns it and who's going to do what. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, you realize that they've turned this whole thing around? They now have socialism for business, but the workers are still in the free enterprise mode of competing with each other. And business will not invest money unless the government guarantees a profit to it. Boy, have they turned things around.
Well, I think we have to mention the New Deal because it radically changed our lives, Roosevelt. In essence, I think what he said was to his people around him, he stole talent wherever he could get it. Got an awful lot of talent out of the Republican Party. The Republican Party at one time had plenty of talent. People like Henry Wallace, for an example, whose dad had been Secretary of Agriculture under the Republicans, Iowa Republican thing, who
Wasn't he a socialist?
he was accused of that. He ended up supporting Eisenhower, though, against Truman, and that's a different story. But I'm going to cite Redmond as an example when it came in. What do we have? The Works Progress Administration, the WPA, the whole series. I was trying to think of what the Blue Eagle was all about. National Recovery Act.
Yeah, NRA.
All right. And this is late. I'm tired. My mind is not working too good. But what did we get along our immediate area around Redmond? What did we get? All right. We got improved roads. We had sewers. We had a huge addition on our school, including gymnasium, home economics, industrial arts area. My dad got that money and got criticized for it because the Republicans thought he was engaging in wasteful activity. You know, the education of children wasn't that essential. And you could go on and on with this, but I have to mention my cousin Claude, who was 14 years older than I, graduated from high school in 1930, right into depression, wanted to go on to college, couldn't go. This is the lost generation, by the way, because there was no money. No one had any money. He lost his parents in the flu epidemic 1918-19. So what was he going to, I remember he and his buddy Hugh McEvers finally got some work. They spent a whole day cutting wood and got 75 cents between them, two of them to split it. It was absolutely hopeless. Then the Civilian Conservation Corps came around, CCC, and he became a CCC boy. Developed a lot of experience, but they would hitchhike around, you know, continue looking for something, anything. It was such a hopeless thing until the New Deal came along. Eventually he got a full-time job as a logger because he happened to show up at a place where the guy setting chokers on the log train had unfortunately been rolled to death when a log rolled over him. They needed a choker setter right at that time, so my cousin got a job there because of the death of the guy. And he understood there several other guys had been killed before him. This is a typical type of thing. By the way, my cousin Claude was 6'4" tall, fantastic build with huge feet. And I used to sit on his foot and he'd swing me back and forth. I enjoyed that so much, except one day he stepped in dog manure before I got on his shoe.
This is a family show, be very careful.
Yeah. So anyway, I use him as a classic example, and these type of things are endless. 1935, my dad packed up our Model A Ford, took all 5 of us. I have 2 older sisters, mother, on through, and he'd taught school originally in Wenatchee and Chelan, Washington, on through to see Grand Coulee Dam, and the roads were all bumpy, nothing you can imagine the conditions of things at that. But this fantastic enterprise, you know, it's just at the time, we just stand there and look at this. This was a product of the New Deal, a complete turnover. Now, I haven't mentioned moving to Seattle in 1937 and the warfare between the AFFL and CIO before they combined.
Right.
Dave Beck versus Harry Bridges. All of these things are part of my experience. This is something I read in a book. So anyway, coming back to that, we could go on endlessly. The great thing, unemployment was still, when Roosevelt took over, it was about 25%. I think by 1939 it had dropped to about 12%. He halved it. There were all sorts of things involved here. But the feeling of hope, you know, we've heard a lot about hope. People had real hope at that time. Second World War came around, of course, and bailed us out. Business could never have done it. My first full-time job was 1942, and there was still unemployment at that time. I was blessing dishes, by the way. We had 3 crews, one coming, one working, and one going, because the owner would fire anyone that dropped a dish or something and broke it. You know, he was something else again. 1943 was the summer before I went into service. I worked for Pacific Huts, which were making things for the Army in Alaska. There was a labor shortage by then. So within 18 months, we were able to create a acute labor shortage. And we get Rosie the Riveter and all the rest of us. This was total war. We were all involved in it. And I changed after December 7th, 41, December 8th, 1941. I came to school my sophomore year, a different kid. It was entirely different. I was no longer the class clown. I was determined to do my best in high school, and I graduated in 3.5 years instead of 4. This is the impact.
Yeah.
I could list all sorts of the race thing. We all shared. There were not flags displayed all over. What you saw were gold stars when a family actually lost someone. These flags came after Vietnam, and particularly after 9/11, 2001. And we have the Bushes showing up with it. We didn't need flags. We thought we knew what we were fighting for. We were fighting for what? The freedom of belief, freedom of speech, the 4 freedoms, freedom from fear, freedom from want. That's what Roosevelt gave us on January 17th, 1941, by the way, before Pearl Harbor, early on. So this, we were going to share. This was a matter of sharing. We had to postpone the New Deal because of the war, but things would be much better afterwards because all the things that got postponed, we would get right after the war.
So, it looks like it's about time to take a break because they're going to yell at me if we don't take a break here. Mr. E, our director, let's take a break, please, for a couple minutes here, and the mic's going to be off as we take a break. Okay, we are back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1 hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is we have decided to talk about. And tonight we're talking about the redeal as an alternative to the deal we've got going on now in our country. And I think we talked earlier about pre-New Deal, and the question in my mind is, how did we get to the conditions that required a New Deal? And the deal that's going on now, is that going to be successful for the betterment of the average American? And is the American dream really in existence? And what's happening now with our country and with America on global politics and social issues and social justice? And let's just keep going and see what we're about so that we have an idea what to expect in the future for America. So, who's going to pick that one up?
You say
Well,
Ted's turn.
My turn? Well, I want to, I guess I've been waiting to drop a few bombs on Will here and see if I can get him to agree with me on this. I think there's going to be a new civil rights movement, and we've had a series of them, fighting slavery, fighting equal opportunity, fighting discrimination in the workplace, and access to jobs. But the new civil rights movement is going to be the right to have a piece of the economy, to be included in the economy, the right to have a job. And I think that the key things are all going to center around the reduced work week. The way to stimulate employment with automation and globalization is to mandate by law a shorter work week, increase the employment of people, and make sure that there is work for everyone, because I do not believe that the free market system is going to fill that void. And it's a global issue. It's happening all over the world. There's a total shortage of opportunity for young people, and the 40-hour, nonetheless 46 or 48-hour work week is what's killing us. We need to reduce the work week. We need to create employment for people. And if the free market doesn't do it, then we'll have to take it away from it and make it work. And I believe that struggle is being taken on by the third world countries now, already.
It seems like you're talking about our situation as human beings on this earth in a way that doesn't make much sense for me. It seems like you're following the economic way of thinking, the economic model. And I'm thinking about a living wage. Never mind the length of the work week or how many hours a day you work. The bottom line is you got to have people earn enough to take care of their families and their kids and get education and all the other necessities of having a successful life. So to talk about shortening the work week and those things that you mentioned, that doesn't mean very much to me. What means something to me is if we have in America and around the world a living wage for whatever work a person does, then it's successful and there is social justice afoot.
Well, in my paradigm, that is a prerequisite. I didn't say a 20-hour work week with 20 hours worth of pay and half the money.
Yes,
I said 20 hours of work with the health care, with the benefits, and with a living wage within that 20 hours. So there's no loss on those other fronts. And that the Europeans are doing it. Basically, the big overall problem with our economic system is it has no reverse gear or a standstill. All it knows how to do is go forward or explode or implode. So, no, there's not a contradiction between the two. But the problem is, in the United States, we don't have a guarantee of either one with the 40-hour work week. We have the 46-hour work week with still no guarantee that it's going to pay you a living wage and no guarantee that you'll have health care or no guarantee. As a matter of fact, all those things are going the other direction. Less people every year have health care. Less people every year have pensions. Everyone's going to these service sector jobs that have no benefits. We have a mass of millions of young people headed towards our age with nothing being set out for them because, well, we're allowing the free enterprise system to decide whether it's a good investment or not. And they've decided there's a cheaper way of doing it. Don't pay into it. And what's the end result going to be? A whole lot of useless eaters with no IRAs, pensions, whatever scheme that you come up with. The main overall thing is just to realize that an economic system is a distribution system, and it is regulated by the rules. And if you don't like the results, change the rules. And I think the rich don't want us to realize that the political system affects everything about the outcome of the economic system. They want us to believe that it's jobs just come out of the interaction of businesses. Matter of fact, there's two or three big lies that need to be shot down. One is that education will not save our children. The whole world is educating its children. People with educations already have suffered setbacks plus unemployment, and that's not the solution. That's the one lie. And the other one is that the rich and the corporations seek to create employment. That's the opposite of what corporations seek. Employees are a cost factor to be eliminated at any expense, move to another country where it's cheaper, and automate wherever you can to eliminate employees. So us going to the paradigm that giving the rich tax breaks and kissing up to the corporations will solve our employment problem is the exact opposite.
I'm sure Will agrees with all that you've said. What do you think, Will?
Yes, I'd like to elaborate on that because I have to come back to the 1930s. I think, and the experience and everything I can, all the people I've known, no important change in our system ever began within the two-party system. The New Deal was a product of an explosion from below. There were hundreds of organizations actually operating out, demanding change, demanding 40 hours. There were massive strikes. You can get boycotts, the whole thing. Big Jim Farley, head of the Democratic National Party in the late 1930s, came out and saw what was going on in Washington State. He said there were 47 states in the Soviet of Washington. And he was just appalled at all the cooperation and things that were going on outside of the two-party system that provided the impetus. All right, what bailed us out, of course, was World War II. Capitalism and war are synonymous, and I must confess I'm a member of Veterans for Peace, the oldest member of Chapter 72, and I love my brothers and sisters passionately within it. The subject came up, how do you from this nice, comfortable background, you know, administrators, become so radical? Because my health insurance was something we were supposed to have. My dad was stricken with cancer completely through his system. Malignant tumor of the brain killed him, and it ate up most everything that he'd worked for 42 years. So, and I was 19 years old. I was engaged intimately in his care and so on. I met, for the first time in my life, death straight on with a key person in my own family. So these things change. I happen to mention to Ted, it's not a book that changed me, that put me on the left. It's the way I feel deep down inside. This is a predatory system. It's based on war. It's based on devouring the natural resources, the beauty. Somebody asked me when I became an environmentalist, and I didn't get a chance to answer it, and they answered, they gave back all your life. Yes, that's the way I've been. I've been a humanist all my life also. Okay, so this is the way I look at things. Wisconsin is a key example of it. You don't plan revolutions. You don't plan change like this. I love Rosa Luxemburg. It's a spontaneous upsurge, and the best education for us is the Arab Spring. Who the hell planned that thing?
Rosa Luxemburg.
Right.
Say a few words about that.
Yeah, well, I could say all sorts of. There were some members of the Socialist Workers' Party, younger people, and I gave them a couple extra copies of Rosa Luxemburg. That kind of offset some of the other things that they had. Anyway, coming back to this upsurge, Egypt is a classic example. Why is it the Muslim Brotherhood ended up in control? Because they were the best organized. What you have to work with is a culture. underneath, down below. If you don't have that, nothing's going to happen. Wisconsin is a classic example. They had the thing going, but they didn't know what a general strike was, how really to carry the thing off. Instead, they threw all the money out in politics, and the thing kind of evaporated away. I'll give you my last date in history. This is one that I love. 9/11/1906. All of you know what that date was. 9/11, 2001, you know. This is more important. 9/11/1906.
What happened then?
Mohandas K. Gandhi led the first massive, successful demonstration against apartheid in South Africa. That's the key. Don't worry about the books. Get out there and organize.
So what's happening nowadays with America and where America is heading? Is this empire, has it reached its peak? Is it going to start turning the
No,
other
it
way?
hasn't reached the peak. It's over the peak.
It's
It's
over.
on its way down. It's shot full with decay. Unfortunately. However, I'm not a pessimist because there are lots of young people becoming active. And much of what I received from the older generation. One of my cousins was an anti-war demonstrator in World War I, where there was massive opposition to that thing, which you never hear anything about. I brought some books, I could even read things about that. Massive opposition to that thing. And he happened to have the German last name from my paternal grandmother's thing, and they were going to lynch him. And he was tipped off. He escaped. This was Hoquiam, Washington, by the way. So this is it. The vigilantes, the fascists, and so on. And fascism is not a foreign influence. It's with us all the time. We have to be alert. Corporations are totalitarian institutions. Top down. They loved Hitler. American corporations were the biggest investors, foreign investors in Nazi Germany, and all sorts of good things from Charles Lindbergh on were said about Nazi Germany. I could give you all sorts of illustrations about the German-American Bund and how it operated in this country. I won't bother with that. But fascism is an everyday fact of life in our country that we have to fight continuously.
So, okay, what would you do if you were in Obama's shoes?
I wouldn't be in his shoes. There's no way you could get me to do that. I don't have that much faith in the two-party political system. I want to be out there in the countryside, jobs with justice or whatever, Veterans for Peace, organizing. By the way, I was a labor organizer one time. I taught school for 36 years, full-time public school teacher. And I went to school on the GI Bill. One thing I would want to give to all the young people is the opportunity I have. They're forcing them into bond peonage. This is a crime. I'd wipe out their debts immediately and let them study whatever they want and blossom out.
Boy, you need to get some people behind you because you need some roots there. I think the Homeland Security is going to be following you
Well,
now.
normally they shoot people like me, you know. we contaminate the environment.
So, what's happening in Syria? What is the reason for what the goings on in Syria, and where is it going to take us?
I have no idea.
Well, I submit that change occurs because of changing circumstances that sometimes are completely outside of the political thinking and the theories. And so what's going on in Syria and all these other countries is part of the changing paradigm caused by modern electronics. Repression, the thing that's going to kill off the old type of repression and solutions that the fascists used before is the camcorder, the internet, and so on and so forth. Because before, you could always, when a few troublemakers like rose up, you could always drag them off, shoot them, and nobody would ask you any questions. Now, all of a sudden, there's global connection. And what's happening is there's a worldwide crisis and opportunity for the young people with college educations, and they're starting to clamor. I wanted them to clamor here because we are the richest and should be leading the charge. But it looks like the third world country educated young disposed people are starting to show us how to use the political process to affect the economic process, because they're tired of sitting around waiting for 10, 15 years after their graduation to get an opportunity to have a job and have a life in a country that's lost in its past economic structure.
What's the result of the Arab Spring and all those revolutions that have happened in the Middle East since the Arab Spring? So all those young people you're talking about are rebelled because they had no work, they got their education, there's no jobs for them. And I think their revolutions have been co-opted by the CIA and our government working behind the scenes, and their future is no different now than it was before the revolutions.
I don't think that those revolutions will form it in a clear solution. It's just the first phase of recognizing that there is a problem, and again, it's the old faction that owns everything, that has everything, that's not allowing the economy to grow and expand, and including the young people in it. And it's the same thing in the United States. Almost to me, it's like our generation has betrayed our own children. Well, we're happy with having a $500,000 house that cost $40,000 30 years ago. We're happy with our pensions and all the stuff that we got while we were fighting for unions and good wages and benefits, and we failed to pass that on to our children. They're out there competing with all the children in the world for their job, and the wages, the benefits, and everything is going downhill with no idea what to do. I mean, I've had several friends that are good union longshoremen people that I have to point out to them is, you know, what you had and what you fought for, you're not willing to fight for your own children. So they're sitting at home at 35 years old with a master's degree with no job. And you're not offering them the same thing that you fought for, because you can't see the connection between the two.
Why aren't they fighting for something different?
Because the education system does not teach basic economics, does not teach basic democracy, and it doesn't challenge young people to what kind of a future do you want out of your world. You have to be a servant and get an education and beg and move from career to career until you are the lucky one. Again, it's competition. Rather than teaching them their solution to their economic problems is to cooperate with each other and cancel the debt that the previous generation made. Change the rules of ownership, the rules that aren't working, to ones that will work for them.
So the education system is producing a nation of drones who are not really aware of what they need to do to take back their system and their country?
It's the most uncontroversial, undebating, unaware, I know video games are fun, and there's still plenty of money out there as long as mom and dad will keep funneling money to you, but we're not offering them a real life, not a real opportunity. And if we don't do that, we're going to wind up in the same place that these other countries are. The problem goes across the board, no matter which country it is. The problem is the people who have money and have wealth are not using it to promote, and they're not distributing it to the other people within the country. And they're all going to fail.
Well, I come back to basic experience, because we've had 40 years now, at least, of the erosion of the American standard of living with what they call globalization. We go back actually before Reagan all the way to Jimmy Carter, deregulation of the airlines. There are a whole bunch of other things having to do with the financial system. But you will not improve the system until you're out there organizing on it. I never moved to the left on the basis of any book I ever read. It was all the experiences I'd had. And besides my 36 years in the classroom, most important was my work as in the building trades as a laborer. There isn't a pneumatic tool, I don't think, that was in existence in the 1950s that I didn't operate at one time. And I happened to mention the exchange I had at the Portland Troublemaker School with a member of the building trades about how to drill in rotten rock against hard rock, and what the trouble is. You see, these are, if you want to get understand intelligence, go to Fred Miles, for heaven's sake. Stand back there and watch the checker and see what he's doing, or go into Home Depot and start cross-examining the people. I love to. This way I spend part of my time, you know. So it's building the opposition. The Chicago teachers have made a way, and I think they have shown a path. They started in 2006 among themselves, dissatisfied with their union. They expanded. They took over the union. They cut back the wages of the officials of the union and used that savings and hired 5 organizers and went out in the community. Now, this is social movement unionism. This is the only way that you can operate and seriously change the system. Don't waste your money on pouring it into a lot of elections and so on. Get out there and organize.
Whoa.
See, but this is my experience. I was heavily involved in a fight for collective bargaining rights for public employees in the 1950s. I can remember what it was like before we had it. And this is a precious right, and it's worth fighting for. It was part of the World War II total war that we lost. We lost World War II by default, and I apologize because I was one of the persons that should have done more and didn't do it at the right time.
Well, that's a powerful statement. We lost World War II. You need to say a few more words about that for me. What do you mean by that?
We haven't got 2 more hours here.
Well, let me say by comparison. I was born in Germany. The country was bombed. I was born into poverty. We had no central heat. There was no glass in the windows, blah, blah, blah. And since then, the German economy has been built up. Germans are secure. They have retirements. They have benefits. They have 6 weeks paid vacation. Their minimum wage is a living wage. But in the United States, the city council, the county, and the state will not pass a law mandating that a job should equal a living. And I've asked, I went to the city council several times. I said, you pass laws about, I did 10 days in jail because my renters didn't mow their grass because it's a criminal act. But if I ask you to pass a law saying that if you're going to hire somebody, you've got to pay them enough to live, that's not within our jurisdiction. Bullshit isn't the way your jurisdiction. It's just something you won't touch. And the other thing about democracy is, what's wrong in this country is, democracy is working fine in the country. All you have to do is walk down the street and ask the average worker. They're willing to sell each other out. They don't care about one another. And that's why corporations run the country, because the American people have got no interest in running it.
Predatory system.
And of course, it's what they want. Yeah, us to compete with each other, not see a common goal of saying, this is our country. It's a democracy, so we can change any law we don't like. And we don't like working for less than living wages. We don't like working without health care. We don't like, but Americans are divided on all these things. Oh, well, it'll cost money. Of course it'll cost money. What's the choice? Hitler had a solution to the choice. You kill the useless eaters.
You're so optimistic.
I am optimistic.
Handle it, the way you're talking, like we're going down the tubes faster than I thought we are, then the way you're talking about the future, it looks like if everybody is behaving and thinking in the way that you're describing, then what the hell is the use? We might as well just roll over and say, walk over.
No, that's the opposite of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this. Once you use the political system and change the rules of taxation, ownership, property rights, patents, and all the other things that we're being suppressed with, we'll have a 20-hour work week, and we'll have the greatest civilization that there ever been, is what we thought we would have had back in the 60s with all the automation technology. We forgot one thing, and that is the owners of automation will never share the benefits with the rest of the people. But we can take that back.
When we take over, it'll be different. And now the time is running out, so we better stop.
Yeah.
So it's close to time for us to stop. Get ready to say goodnight. Keep your pens and pencils handy because you may want to jot down something that we'll show you in the closing credits. And thanks for watching. Oh, by public service announcements. And to watch my shows on the web, Google Don Baham, YouTube, and there's a whole bunch of my shows that have been recorded through the years with different guests and different subjects. And the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, without the ACLU, our civil liberties would be further down the tubes than they are nowadays, yeah. And next, we want to tell you about then watch my shows regularly by your local public access station. Go to www.pegmedia.org. And no matter where in the country that you're watching this show, if you want your local broadcast station to broadcast my shows regularly, go to that site. And we got to end corporate personhood so we can take our country back. Go to www.movetoamend.org to learn how to end corporate personhood and take our country back from the corporations. Thanks for watching this episode of Conversations with Dr. Don. And thank you guys for coming on again. Glad to have you. And it's what a grip he's got.
Holding on to the pneumatic hammers.
And now my favorite thought for the day, be nice. Simple as that. And remember KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken, Dr. Don's KFC. Kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, be charitable. In other words, be nice. Simple as that. Thanks again for watching. Good night.